Well, hello everyone. Happy Friday. Hope you all who celebrate had a fantastic Thanksgiving yesterday. Today I am excited because I am going to be chatting Cab Franc with um, I'm sorry about that. I'm going to be talking Cab Franc with David Stannard, who is the founder and owner director of Paradise Rescue. He was born and educated in England, qualifying for a chemical engineer from Birmingham University. And David has successful leadership career in the petrochemical industry in the UK, Netherlands, and Australia. But all of that is very impressive. But what's the best is that he is a producer of Cab Franc in Bordeaux. So we are going to try to get him in here. And let's see if I can do this. Invited, and we'll see if it works. He should be able to get in any minute. And there he is. Hi, David.
Hi, Laurie. How are you?
I am great.
In California than we have in Australia.
It is pretty darn nice right now. I'm not going to lie. It's like 65 degrees. So it is a beautiful day. So,
Excellent.
and what time is it there?
Well, I'm in Australia at the moment, so it's 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning in Melbourne, Victoria. So, yeah, it's a great time of the day.
Yeah, I love when I get to talk to somebody a different day than what I'm in. I just think that's the coolest thing. I really don't know why I think it's so cool, but I do. I do.
Well, it's Saturday morning here. It's always great to be in Australia because you're always ahead of the curve on all of those things. So,
Right? Yeah, you kind of can know what you can give. You can give the heads up, I guess, right?
that's it. Yep, well, we know what's coming for your day.
Yeah. So we are here to talk about Cab Franc and Cab Franc
Fantastic.
Day. So, you have been as passionate about Cab Franc
Absolutely.
since I created the day back in 2015. So it's
Yeah.
great to have somebody who has as much passion as it as I do. So first off, let's start off with where is your property actually located?
Yeah, Paradise Rescue is really a community project. So it started out as a sustainability project in 2010. We are pretty much one of the smallest vineyards in the whole of Bordeaux, which, as you well know, is one of the largest vineyard areas in the world. We're situated about 45 minutes drive, 35 kilometers southeast of the city of Bordeaux. On pretty much the right bank of the River Garonne. So we're just up on the sort of gentle rolling hills above the River Garonne, there southeast of Bordeaux, in the little village of CARDAN.
CARDAN. Okay, so now I know how to say it properly. And so, so why Cab Franc? Why is it such a special grape variety to you?
I mean, there's several reasons why we ended up in that particular space. And the whole foundation of our project was to sustain the rural heritage of our village. And that particular, the Cabernet Franc vineyard from which we produce our Block 1 brand is situated and overlooked by a small 12th century church. And the vineyard sits between the church and our neighbors and friends. So it became a question of, do we, as people living in that village, do we stay there and defend that piece of land and keep it as a vineyard effectively? That means buy it, become professional, start making wine for it, or do we go and do something else? And at the time we bought it, the people selling it to us said, no, you got a little block of Merlot there, enjoy and do what you want with it. And it was only literally about 2 days before we signed the final contract that they turned around and said, oh, by the way, it is Cabernet Franc. Now, back in those days, you didn't think too much about that. You knew you were in Bordeaux. You really were getting started with a certain amount of passion and naivety about what you wanted to do. And it's only, of course, then you arrive at the end of your first production season in 2010, and you produce this wine. And, well, there's nothing else to put with it. Yeah, it is Cabernet Franc. It's 100% Cabernet Franc. So let's get on and enjoy it. And what, of course, came out of that is the realization that Cabernet Franc is something very unique and special. And to actually have it there 100% into bottle, and suddenly also to find out that in the context of Bordeaux, it is almost completely unique. Now, there are 6,000 producers in Bordeaux. There are just billions of bottles every year. It's a massive amount of wine that is put in that space. Yeah, it's 110,000 hectares, which is 250,000 acres of vineyard alone. And there's just about 10 of us producing pure Cabernet Franc. And when you actually start to have that discussion and dialogue and taste what goes on in the Cabernet Franc, the bells and lights come on immediately. I mean, this is and particularly in Bordeaux, because you get a much riper taste because it's much further south in European context, as you will find out, obviously, for your wines in California. There, further south you are, the more ripeness you get into there. Mm-hmm. And the expression of fruits and the taste you get is quite unique. And it is the specialness that comes out of that, and not a moment of regret that we had that accident of literally buying a property close to this vineyard and taking that vineyard over, and there you are, perfect.
Sometimes the stars align, right?
That's correct. It is that, and and we quite often talk, and people ask for you, tell us about your story, and look, the story of becoming a vineyard and a wine producer is slightly accidental. It was a necessity that had to be done in that context. Otherwise, we were going to have, an overdevelopment of our little village and lose this beautiful piece of France. And the fact that it was Cabernet Franc there, well, that's the way it goes. And we've learned so much and grown so much out of that. And I still find that today here in Australia, as I talk with customers and so on. There's something unique about Cabernet Franc that grabs a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And you can't find as much of it as you would like. That is for sure.
Absolutely. And like I said, that's kind of why I started the holiday, was because there really isn't a lot of Cab Franc out there. And I don't know if it has to do, in partial with Cab Franc Day, but there seems to be today a lot more publicity for Cab Franc than there was back in 2015 when I started this venture. And I don't know if it has to do with it or not, but I think people are becoming more passionate about the grape, about Cab Franc. I mean, we're seeing, seminars all over the place now across the country for Cab Franc.
No, I think that's absolutely right, Laurie. I mean, what you have done, and what all of us have done to some extent in that Cabernet Franc space, but you've taken a leadership position in there, is to put it back on the map. I did some very quick stats going into this. I just looked a few facts and figures up yesterday, and if you look at it in terms, let's compare it probably against the other grape variety that's probably on the it's lighter again than Cabernet Franc. And I always joke, but I say that Cabernet Franc is like Pinot Noir on steroids, because there's a lot of the same things that go into it. Pinot Noir is very fine wine. It has lots of aromas and expressions of fruit in it. And Cabernet Franc I always see as being in that sort of context, but it moves it up a notch in terms of body and weight. And what you look at there, you see the Pinot Noir around the world has twice as many acres or hectares of surface under production as Pinot Noir than Cabernet Franc. But if you then go and say, like, even just check on Instagram, you look at the number of times in which the hashtag Pinot Noir or Pinot is used relative to the hashtag of Cab Franc or Cabernet Franc, the factor's about 6 to 1. And the challenge in there is that what has happened is that, as you quite often rightly point out, it's a blend. It's been used classically as a blending wine, and it's hidden away certainly in Bordeaux. Everybody now understands more clearly the value of Cabernet Franc. That's not driven by the likes of you and me. That's driven by climate change, to be honest, that is forcing people to relook at the value of Cabernet Franc relative to Merlot, particularly on the right bank of Bordeaux. And we are also talking about it. But France has that characteristic that if you're what we call a wine amateur, a lover of wine there, you know your brands and you associate with the brand and not so much specifically with a grape varietal. So again, in terms of the Loire Valley, which is the other great home for Cabernet Franc in the world and in France, then it's still, you know the producer, but in knowing a producer of a wine, you don't necessarily know, or the rest of the world doesn't necessarily know, that's not specialized there, that it's a Cabernet Franc.
Absolutely. Right. I agree. And so at Paradise Rescued, what is your case production in total? And then how much Cab Franc do you produce?
Yeah, look, Cabernet Franc, we really have got, I mean, it sounds very grand, but look, we're not the smallest producer in Bordeaux. We're the second smallest. And out of a list of 6,000, that's, I don't know, it's probably not an achievement, but there we are. We did find one in Saint-Emilion this year that is smaller than us. We have a total of about 2 acres or 1 hectare. It's pretty much a 50-50 split between Cabernet Franc and Merlot. Okay. And that is really, I guess, following the Bordeaux system, if you like. And to be fair, those grape varieties grow really well in that part of the world. Good clay, soil, limestone underneath, really classic. All of that side of Bordeaux has very good land and soil for growing Cabernet Franc on. So that corresponds to probably every year. It's starting to stabilize now as we've progressively improved the soil over the last 10 years or so. And it's about 200 cases, let's say between 2,000 and 2,500 bottles a year of Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc has a slightly lower yield than Merlot in a good year. And look, something like 2021 was not a great year for Merlot, but Cabernet Franc just keeps going on. It's very resilient in all that areas. It isn't a sensational grape variety to have in your mix. There's no doubt about that.
And now let's talk about your vineyard site itself. So how are you training your vines, and what do you look for when it comes time to harvest and that type of situations?
Well, we're interesting. I think people like to think of us as being traditional. I like to think that we have a combination between a lot of traditional stuff we do. Because we're so small, we work at it by hand. So it's very artisanal. We always call ourselves handcrafted. That's the way we operate. Look, we still follow a lot of what I call the traditional Bordeaux principles, but just one at a time. We keep changing and upgrading one little thing. So from day one in 2010, we have always farmed completely organically. And all our wine manufacture is organic. It's a passion. It's very, very strong in our DNA as an organization, as a vineyard. We grow a classic Bordeaux double guillot system, 1 trunk, 2 side spurs, grows up from there. Usually about 8 vertical shoots per branch. But look, one of the key things we've had to learn is you work with nature. You cannot dictate to nature what it should do, and if you do, it bites back. And we see that on a global scale absolutely right now, and it's telling us what we got wrong, and we have to respond. So look at the characteristics as you follow that. There are some standard operations that we all go through on a yearly basis. You prune, you lay your sticks down, you tie them down, but then you watch it. You look and you see whether you've got too much fruit or not enough fruit. It literally is, it's a hands-on, I call it a bit of a battle, but you continue to work at it all through the season. And as you get towards the end, again, you've got to look at the season. Like this year was was a classic in Bordeaux because it's probably one of the hottest, if not the hottest ever in the vineyards of Bordeaux. And I mean, you're seeing similar effects, of course, in California as things continue to warm up. Fortunately, our Cabernet Franc vineyard actually is in a slightly sort of wetter bowl or hollowed out area, which was really useful. So for our vines, we looked at them and go, they're good. What's happening there? And you go, well, we got some lucky factors, but it is also Cabernet Franc, which has better resilience than Merlot in those sort of conditions. Right. And you get to the end of the season, you start, you've kept the right amount of fruit. You've done a little bit of thinning as you've gone through. Once you can see what's going to set, what's not going to set, whether there's any impact to disease, what you've got to cut off, etc. And then literally coming up towards the end, you start taking leaves off for us in the northern hemisphere, as it were, off the north side, off the sunrise side, north or easterly side, and then you progress that through, but not too fast. Right. And to be honest, Laurie, still the best method about there, because it is the debate of every vintage, is do we harvest this weekend or next weekend? And for us, it's always a weekend because that's when our neighbours and friends are available to help us. So it's a community project, and that's the way we roll. And but yeah, the best method is still to get out there, and I do a mixture of, you go out there, yeah, pretty good, no, yes, no, and after a time you build up a very clear picture of what the taste of your grapes are like and what have you, and you can see visually whether you're going to be homogeneous, heterogeneous, whether you have to adapt and chop little green ones off before you get there, or do it later when you hand pick. And then there's always, you take samples, you get the little what I call the optimetre out, and you just check on the sugars and you work it through from there. I always keep the data and log it all, but then even this year, I have to say, you took all of that. We even take laboratory samples. And when you got to the day and you take the juice and you get it in your vat, you go, that bears no resemblance to what we had. Absolutely. It was 1 degree, 1% sugar higher than we had expected. And I don't know, you can't explain all of that. Was it more ripe in the center of the bunch? Is unusual, but possible. But yeah, it's a plant, it's a fruit, and you have to respect that.
It's a living thing, and it's going to do what it wants to do, right?
it does what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, we always, we get serious about, and it is. We're pretty pleased that the quality of the wine we have, and our emphasis is always on quality, not on quantity. But at the end of the day, you have to realize, a vine is a weed. It's been a bit sort of looked after and modified, and and it's crossed its own genetics thousands of times and so on. But at the end of the day, it's a weed. If you let alone, it'll grow straight up a tree, and some people do. It's how you want to do it. But it is a weed, and it is very much part of nature.
And it does, its goal is to survive. So
absolutely.
It's putting out that greenery, which is great for the vine, not so great for the fruit. Right, not so great for the end product. So we need to do a little taming of it.
We need a bit of taming. I think one of certainly my observations, though, progressively over time, Laurie, is becoming that, and this goes along with our philosophy as we move on from organics, and we're moving now. We use partial biodynamics, but not a lot. We have some constraints in there in terms of harvest days and planting days and stuff like that, which keep us out of that sort of certified space. But we're going to more regenerative organic viticulture, and increasingly the respect for the soil and the plant grows with that whole approach and philosophy. And the green stuff is good stuff. And my observation is that some of the stuff that we do with other plants in our own gardens, we then try and apply to a vine in sort of, be it love it or hate it, but it's an industrial, maybe artisanal, but it's an industrial situation. It's a farming situation, and I'm not always convinced that's right. I mean, there's a certain amount of wildness that needs to go with it for it to get the maximum amount of value out of its surroundings, out of nature, out of the sunlight, out of everything. And we've conditioned ourselves to be way, way, way too much machine orientated. So we get a tractor out there of, God, I mean, some of the things I see happening in certain parts of the world now, the size of these machines is so big. One slight mistake and you lose 5 rows. It's horrible. But we're conditioned as humans, to say, oh, that's a nice garden. And why does it look nice? Because we cut the grass, because we cut the plants back, we grow them into shrubs and shapes of this size. That's not what nature does. Right. That's what we do to make it pretty. And progressively, the more and more we go on, we try to make it pretty, and then the next part of it is making it less pretty, I think.
And so, in your vineyard site, how would you compare what your Cab Franc is going to taste like on an average vintage? Like every vintage is different. So, like comparatively, right, how would you say that your Cab Franc would be similar or different to somebody who's used to a California Cab Franc?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes I need to get out of the office and drink more Cab Franc, but that's not easy to find. Be honestly, and I'm just interesting as I've been, in Melbourne, visiting and talking with customers, new customers, potential customers, and so on. You can walk into yesterday. I was talking with a couple of wine bar clients, and you go in and go, oh, how many bottles of Cabernet Franc have you got on the shelf? Yeah.
It's a hand sell. It's still a hand sell.
It is. And look, that's also part of the amazing thing that is actually going to be a great benefit of the Cabernet Franc in the years ahead. Because one of the things you do find is whenever you talk to somebody that has sufficient, and it's growing, that level of knowledge and appreciation, and people working in hospitality and all that, starting to have a better basis to that, so they've got some sommelier training, they understand grape varieties. And even in a country like Australia, where we've spent a lot of time with huge focus on big red wines, the subtlety and nuances of Cabernet Franc is starting to be better appreciated. For Bordeaux, it is for us, the marvel of being Bordeaux, it's easiest probably to compare it, say, to the Loire Valley, which is only, about 300 or so kilometers further north from us. But the climate is very different. And I always call the Loire Valley just on the borderline between cool weather and warm weather. And there is a real line in the natural climatology of France in that space. But in Bordeaux, as a result of that warmer climate, you get much more, in my view, fruit expression. There's a risk of having a touch more alcohol, particularly something like a 2022 when it's a really hot summer. So your sugar levels rapidly rise before your ripeness does, and that's a tricky balance for holding it back in your vineyard. And hand pruning and work is really useful in that space to keep the grapes covered as long as possible. And what you see though is a less greener taste. Now that for the North American palate is always called the bell pepper taste that you and I have done, and you've always got the technical pyrozones and all the great words that go with it. But it's a less greener taste, and part of that comes out because it's a much riper taste. And and without being disparaging to people who do a wonderful job with Cabernet Franc in cooler climates, and you move across into Canada or something like that. I mean, it's just amazing that you manage to grow a grape and get it to some level of ripeness in that sort of a level of climate. But that's Cabernet Franc. It has a much bigger span of space and climates that can be used in. But the further south you get in the northern hemisphere or north in the southern hemisphere, the warmer it will get, and the greater is that you get less of that acidity. You get much stronger. I would describe it as more of a cherry nose and flavor. It starts off probably at black currants and moves across through red into black cherries for us in Bordeaux. You get a less of a greener taste, which is obviously quite pronounced in most wines. Even if you have some less riper fruit in your Merlot, you can always pick that greener taste in there. And I don't know whether it is unique to Bordeaux or unique to our piece of terroir, but there's certainly the length and the aftertaste on the wine is dramatic.
Okay.
And particularly, it gives a slight spiciness to it, which is great if you want to put that and serve that. And Cabernet Franc is a really food-friendly wine, just brilliant with food. And it goes with such a wide variety of food. And if you want to use something with a bit of spice in there, even dreaded chilies or something like that, Cabernet Franc can quite often handle it because of that final finishing taste. And we see that a lot. I was scared of it initially, but now that I see it, it's an opportunity. You got a bit of chili in the food there. Get the Cabernet Franc out. We can handle it.
Absolutely. And now, so what is something that you think people who are new to Cab Franc need to know about the variety? What's like that one thing that you want newbie Cab Franc people to leave knowing?
One, get your corkscrew or your hand out and open the bottle and get tasting. That's the primary thing on, look, it's a primary thing, Laurie. I mean, it's the same issue that you and I will have struggled with for all of our lives of doing this, and I'm sure it'll still be here in 20 years. Cabernet Franc, you always say it's the daddy, I say it's the mummy to other great wines and varietals in the world, like Cabernet Franc, like Merlot, and the list goes on. Whatever Cabernet Franc was up to in the vineyards of Bordeaux, it had a great time. It is not Cabernet Sauvignon. It is not Cabernet. We need as a world to get rid of this term Cabernet. Yeah, Cabernet is the name of the cat that belongs to the mayor that helps us do the vineyard work in Bordeaux. Yeah, that's Cabernet. Yeah, the trouble is the world, and look, Australia is no better than the USA on this.